All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're heading to the Caribbean, to an island you might not know a ton about, but should. It's called Saint Lucia.
It's one of those places you see on a map and think, oh yeah, the Caribbean, but there's so much more to it than meets the eye.
Exactly. And what's kind of cool is our source material for this one is a YouTube video script. So we get to see how much we can learn about a place, even from something that was, meant to be seen, not heard.
It's like a little puzzle, figuring out what the visuals were trying to convey and filling in the blanks with our own knowledge.
Right. And just to give you a taste, we're talking about a nation that was literally a tug-of-war prize between Britain and France, like back and forth 14 times.
Can't make this stuff up.
Nope. Plus, they've got a fruit there that supposedly tastes like chicken.
You're kidding, right? Chicken fruit.
I know, it sounds wild, but that's what the source says. And get this, they have a volcano you can literally drive into.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Before we get to the chicken fruit, though, maybe we should get our bearings. Can you tell us a little bit about where St. Lucia is and why it matters in the Caribbean?
Yeah, for sure. So picture this. You've got this chain of islands curving through the eastern Caribbean Sea. These are the Lesser Antilles.
Okay, got it.
So St. Lucia is right there, nestled in the middle, small but mighty, they say.
I like that. Small but mighty.
Only about 238 square miles, but it's played this huge role in the region's history, like way back in colonial times and even now as an independent nation.
It's always fascinating to see how these smaller nations have navigated the currents of history, so to speak.
So let's rewind the clock, way back. Who were the first people to call this island paradise home?
Well, long before the Europeans ever showed up, it was the Arawak people. They actually migrated from South America.
Interesting, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and then they were followed by the Carib tribes, who they were known for, well, putting up a pretty fierce fight against colonization.
Oh, I bet. I mean, when Columbus sailed by in 1502 on his fourth voyage, he probably heard all kinds of stories about them.
Yeah, I mean, their reputation definitely preceded them.
So when did this whole, back and forth between the British and the French start? When did it become, a prize to be won?
Well, it was the French who first tried to settle there in the early 1600s, but the Caribs, they weren't giving up their home without a fight.
That makes sense.
So their resistance and the fact that St. Lucia was in such a strategically important location, it made it a target for both the French and the British. And then, well, what happened next was a constant power struggle that lasted over a century. The island literally changed hands 14 times.
14 times.
14!
That's just wild. I can't even imagine what it must have been like for the people living there. All that instability and upheaval must have been exhausting.
It's amazing they survived it all, really.
No kidding. It's no wonder they called it the Helen of the West Indies.
Right. Constantly being fought over, just like Helen of Troy.
Exactly. So when did this tug-of-war finally end?
Well, finally in 1814, the Treaty of Paris officially made St. Lucia a British colony. It was like, okay, enough is enough. Britain, you win.
But, I mean, that kind of set the stage for a pretty dark period in St. Lucia's history.
Sadly, you're right. That's when the whole brutal system of slavery really took hold. Thousands of Africans were brought to the island to work on sugar plantations. It left a lasting scar, you know?
A scar that you can still see today in so many ways. And even after Britain abolished slavery in 1834, the effects, I mean, they were felt for generations.
For sure. It's not something you just erase overnight.
The source material even mentions that St. Lucia, at one point, they faced economic hardship because of a decline in, get this, a certain type of iguana whose skin was exported.
Wait, really?
I know, it sounds like this tiny detail, but it's actually really fascinating.
It is. It shows just how dependent the island was on its natural resources. Like, even a small shift could have a huge impact.
It makes you think about, the dangers of relying solely on one resource for economic stability, right?
Absolutely. Sustainability is such a crucial lesson, especially for island nations like St. Lucia.
So how did St. Lucia finally break free from all this? How did they get their independence?
It was a process, not a sudden event. In 1951, they got voting rights, which was a huge step. It was like, okay, we have a voice now.
Right, that's a game changer for sure.
And then in 58, they joined this thing called the West Indies Federation, which was an attempt to unify a bunch of Caribbean islands, but it didn't really work out.
It's interesting how many times that's been tried, different islands trying to come together,
Yeah.
but it never seems to quite stick.
There's so much history and individual identity tied up in each island, it's hard to let go of that.
It's understandable, I guess. So when did they finally achieve full independence?
February 25th, 1979. Mark it on your calendars. It's a day to celebrate.
I will. So, fast forwarding to today, our source tells us that tourism is like the main thing driving St. Lucia's economy these days.
Makes sense, though, right? It's such a beautiful place.
Oh, absolutely. It's got lush rainforests, beaches that look like they're straight out of a postcard, and those iconic volcanic
Yeah,
peaks.
those pictons are something else.
They are, and over 1 million tourists visit each year, apparently.
Wow, that's a lot for such a small island.
It is. And I know we talked about the drive-in volcano, but the thing that really caught my eye was this idea of making your own chocolate.
Hold on, what?
I know, right? Tell me more about that.
Well, they call St. Lucia the Chocolate Island sometimes because they have this long history of cocoa production.
Okay.
But it goes beyond just growing cocoa. They actually let tourists visit the plantations, learn about the process, and even get their hands dirty, like actually try making chocolate themselves.
See, this is what I love about these deep dives. You never know what little treasures you're going to unearth.
I know, it's like a treasure hunt for knowledge.
Okay, so we've got drive-in volcanoes, chicken fruit, and now make your own chocolate.
Yeah.
What other surprises does this little island have up its sleeve?
Buckle up, because this one's a doozy. The source mentions a crying tree, like actually a tree that cries. Apparently, it secretes this milky white liquid when it rains.
A crying tree. I've never heard of anything like that.
Me neither. And there's more. Get this, they've got this silent whistling frog, which is kind of ironic because it doesn't actually croak or make any sound.
So it's a frog that whistles but silently. That doesn't even make sense.
Right. It's like, what's the point of whistling if nobody can hear you?
Nature is so strange sometimes. What else? What else is there?
Okay, ready for this? They've got a dreamfish that sleeps with its eyes open.
Hold on. A fish that sleeps with its eyes open? How is that even possible?
I don't know, but it's true. It's one of those things you just have to see to believe, I guess.
It's like something out of a science fiction movie.
Right. But it just goes to show, St. Lucia is full of these little surprises, these things that make you go, huh, that's weird.
It really highlights the biodiversity of the island, like all these incredible creatures sharing this tiny piece of paradise.
Exactly. And it makes you realize how important those conservation efforts are, to protect these unique ecosystems.
Absolutely. We don't want to lose any of this amazing stuff. Okay, so we've talked about nature and history. What about the political side of things? What's the scene in St. Lucia today?
Well, according to our source, they've got this two-party system that basically alternates power. The two main parties are the St. Lucia Labor Party and the United Workers' Party.
So, pretty straightforward then.
Yeah, seems pretty stable. Peaceful transitions of power, which is always good to see.
Yeah, no kidding. And even though they got their independence back in '79, they're still a constitutional monarchy, right?
That's right, with the British monarch as the head of state, represented by a governor general.
It's interesting how those historical ties linger even after independence.
Yeah, it shows the lasting impact of colonialism,
Mhm.
how it shapes not just the past, but also the present.
The source also mentions that they recently established diplomatic relations with Pakistan in 2024.
Oh, yeah, that's right, but there's a little quirk there.
Yeah, what's that?
Well, Pakistanis need a visa to visit, but Indians can stay for up to 42 days without one.
Huh, that's interesting. It's a reminder that international relations, they're not always simple. There's a lot of history and politics involved.
Absolutely. It's like visa requirements can be a window into the relationships between countries.
Totally. So we've covered history, politics, and wildlife. What about the culture? What's it like to live in St. Lucia?
Well, English is the official language, of course, but a lot of locals speak Creole, which is this cool mix of French, African, and Caribbean influences.
Oh, wow. So they've got their own dialect.
Yeah, it's pretty common in the Caribbean, actually. It reflects the history of the islands, the mix of different cultures and languages.
That's cool. And what about religion? What's the main religion in St. Lucia?
The majority of the population is Christian, but you've also got smaller communities of Rastafarians, Hindus, and Muslims. It's like a melting pot of different faiths.
That's great. Tolerance and diversity are always good things.
Definitely. It's about respecting each other's beliefs and living together in harmony.
So it sounds like St. Lucia has a pretty good track record when it comes to education too, right? Their literacy rate is over 90%, which is impressive.
Yeah, that's really high. It shows how much they value learning and knowledge. It's inspiring to see.
It is. I mean, we've learned so much about St. Lucia today, and it's just like blown me away. We've got the chicken fruit, the silent whistling frog, the black sand beaches, and so much more. What stands out to you the most? What really makes St. Lucia unique in your mind?
What strikes me is how this tiny island manages to capture so many big global themes like colonialism, the fight for independence, the delicate balance between economic growth and taking care of the environment, and this resilience of their cultural identity. It's like St. Lucia is a microcosm of the world in a way.
I totally agree. It's this little island that holds so much history and complexity. And honestly, after learning all this, I'm just itching to go there. I want to see the Pitons with my own eyes, hike through the rainforest, and maybe, just maybe, try some of that chicken fruit.
You and me both. It's definitely going on my travel bucket list.
Hmm.
But for now, I think we've done a pretty good job of exploring St. Lucia, at least from afar.
We have, but the journey doesn't have to end here. What do you think our listeners should take away from all of this? Why should they care about this little island in the Caribbean?
I think for me, it's that St. Lucia shows us like a world that's both familiar and totally different at the same time. It's this reminder that even now, with how connected everything is, there are still places out there with their own rhythms and traditions and stories just waiting to be discovered.
Yeah, it kind of challenges those ideas we have about what a Caribbean island is supposed to be. We think of white sand beaches and crystal clear water, which they have, of course, but it's more than that.
Way more. Like you said, they've got black sand beaches from the volcanoes, that chicken fruit thing, a parrot you can't find anywhere else. It's like nature decided to get creative.
Exactly. And it makes you realize there's always something new to learn. Always something more to explore. And what I find really inspiring about St. Lucia is its resilience. I mean, think about it. This nation was fought over for centuries, endured slavery, faced economic hardship, but they still managed to preserve their culture, gain their independence, and build a nation that values education and protecting the environment.
It really speaks to the strength of the people, doesn't it? He took all that history, all that complexity, and wove it into something beautiful and unique.
And they did it all surrounded by some of the most incredible scenery in the world. I mean, those pitons rising up out of the sea, the rainforest teeming with life, all those strange and wonderful creatures. It's magical.
It does sound like something out of a dream.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into St. Lucia, let's leave our listeners with a question, something to think about. Knowing all that we've learned today about their history, their nature, their culture, even that touch of mystery, what do you think? What do you think has shaped St. Lucia's identity the most?
It's a great question to ponder. And for everyone listening, don't let the exploration stop here. Dive deeper into whatever caught your attention. Maybe it's the colonial past, the wildlife, the festivals and celebrations, or hey, maybe even try to track down that chicken fruit.
Who knows? You might just uncover some secrets of your own. So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep that curiosity alive.